Formosa Cafe.
Right.
A place that I thought was an Italian restaurant. Formosa my life.
I hate you so much for that.
It doesn't make sense that it's not an Italian... I mean, it does. I'll explain why, but
Yeah.
I always assumed it was an Italian restaurant.
It's Asian cuisine, right?
Yeah.
I like how two so far have been well, I don't know if they're cultural appropriating.
No, it is.
Oh,
it is, but it comes full circle.
Talk spontaneously about it.
Let me just, off the top of my head, let me check my top of the head notes. At the intersection of Santa Monica and Formosa, which I think got its name from the restaurant, because otherwise it's a huge coincidence given that the Republic of Formosa was the name for Taiwan when they were briefly independent in 1895, and this is a Chinese restaurant. So it's a weird thing of
what came first?
Yeah, because there's no way that they decided to open a Chinese-themed restaurant with a Chinese-themed name on a street that has that same name.
Yeah.
That's an obscure name for the type of food that they're making.
They're maybe they bought the property and they're like, oh, what do we do with it?
I can tell you they didn't buy the property, but I really don't know. I was trying to look up when did Formosa Street get its name, and it's all just Charlie Chaplin lived here.
It is a shortcut to Melrose Boulevard.
It was at the address
Avenue. Melrose Avenue, sorry. It's
you almost look like a fool. Your navigational prowess has been challenged. At the address of 7156 Santa Monica Boulevard, which was Route 66, there has been a restaurant in some form here since 1915. What that first restaurant might have been, we don't know, but by the 20s it was a place called the Red Post Cafe, which it was not called Red Post Avenue that it was on. So it seems to have opened in 1928, the Red Post Cafe, but I'm not sure who owned it, because there's sort of the story that's become the official canon of the Formosa Cafe, and then there's the actual facts that people have uncovered. Mm-hmm. One part of the story that is for sure, though, is that in 1939, the restaurant was bought by a guy named Maximilian Goldstein, aka Max Goldie.
Ooh, I like that. Maxi Goldie?
Max Gold.
Max Gold.
Who seems to have had some ties to organized crime that, as you'll soon hear, did not end well. Goldie rebuilt the place instead of just some greasy spoon that people from the studio next door would go to. It's right next to what used to be. It was Pickford Fairbanks Studio, then United Artists Studio, then Sam Goldwyn, then...
Oh, that's right. It's right next to it.
It's right next to it. And then it was an extension of Warner Brothers, and now it's just called The Lot. He wanted to make...
asking a lot. Go ahead.
Formosa. He wanted to now make it into a full-service restaurant and cocktail lounge. This Max Gold.
Maxi Goldie?
Max Goldie. The problem was this place was known for being tiny, so he had to make some more space to accommodate his big cocktail dreams. So instead of building a new section to the restaurant on land that wasn't his own, mind you, it was owned by the studio, this land that it was on.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So he instead saw an old Pacific Electric red car that had been decommissioned in 1936 and decided to just slap that onto the side of the building, and boom, suddenly you have a room for a bunch of more tables in there. So it's another one of those restaurants that's also a train car.
Cool.
It's one of, well, I guess one of the Pacific dining cars closed. So what, there's 4 now, and counting the Carnies?
Carnies, yeah. I guess there's
2
4.
Carnies, Pacific dining car, and Formosa Cafe.
I mean, Travel Town, you can take an apple on if they don't know.
They let me take my lunch right in the train.
Right in the train.
Gosh shucks. You're Huck Finn. The trolley they have there is car 913, which means that it was in the... This is why I think you'll like this story, because it's all about restoring old train cars, which means that it was in the first series of red cars, which means it was made sometime between 1902 and 1906.
Wow, so it's old.
It's an old car. So this was the new setup, and the place was now called the Formosa Nightclub. However, like I said, Goldie was involved with organized crime, so in 1945, he lost the restaurant in a poker game, and then not long after that, he was found shot to death in the back inside of a phone booth on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Wow.
So that's the end of Max Goldie.
I want to know more about him in the phone booth.
I want to know more about that phone booth.
Yeah.
Is he some sort of a Superman character? So now here's where things get even more vague. The official story is that the restaurant was then bought by a boxer from New York named Jimmy Bernstein, who got hurt and had to quit boxing and ended up moving to LA. He was friends with Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks, and he decided to start making money by opening up a restaurant. But further historical digging found that it was actually bought by some guys named Bobby Goodman and Stan Marcus, who let some bookie, also named Jimmy Bernstein, buy into the restaurant with them, thinking he was the Jimmy Bernstein, the boxer.
Oh my God.
And then this guy shows up, and they're just like, well, fine, you have the money. We could just say Jimmy Bernstein part owns this place.
Jimmy Bernstein, but he can't come out and say and talk to you guys.
Pay no attention to the guy behind the trolley car from 1902. So whoever the real Bernstein was, it's 1945, and the Formosa nightclub is now known as the Formosa Cafe, and it gets a complete remodel. Now it is to be refocused with a Cantonese theme, serving Chinese food and having Chinese-inspired decorations with, again, another very dark place, dark reds, lots of wooden patterns and dim lighting. Ads for the rebranding promise Cantonese dishes for the gourmet, American dishes for the particular.
Oh, for you who can't stomach noodles.
Yeah, Canton, eat that.
You almost had it.
For most of the time I had it, but it was a lot. It took a full 3 years before this group of decidedly white guys running a Chinese restaurant to bring in an actual Chinese chef named Lem Quan.
That must have took a lot of brain. They must put their think tank together for that one. We should get an actual Asian person in here.
Our Chinese food tastes like garbage because we make it. 3 Jewish guys. How can
what
we...
could it be?
What's the missing ingredient? Quan was born January 15th, 1910 to Ton Quan and Wu Shi in Hong Kong. When he was very young, his parents and his older brother moved to LA to make a living. And when he was 12, they finally had enough money to send for him. So he took a 36-day boat ride on a cargo ship to San Francisco with his dad's 70-year-old friend.
Did it sink and they had to rebuild it? Why did it take so long?
I'm surprised it took that short in 1922 or whatever to sail from Hong Kong to San Francisco.
I'm reading that Mark Twain book and he's like, oh God, I got to get to England right now. And 2 months later, he got there.
You made it here in record time. He eventually made his way to rejoin his family in LA and worked for his dad in a Chinese restaurant called Too Far Low.
Okay.
Now that I'm saying it out loud, that sounds like it's wordplay. Too Far Low? I don't know. I'm sure something racist just came out of my mouth.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get canceled.
Then the World War, the second one, hit, and Quan joined the army to fight for his new country. He obviously had an inclination towards cooking, so he was made a chef, and after the war, he started cooking at Shanghai Jin in LA. But once they lost their lease there, he found his way to the Formosa, where he became the head chef and eventually part owner, and brought actual Cantonese experience to the place, finally. But what the Formosa Cafe was really known for was being one of the places in town where celebrities came to eat. You're bragging about the senator from the Philippines? Well, guess what? I've got Ava Gardner coming up.
Ava Gardner?
Ava Gardner from the Philippines? That time-honored tradition of people from the studio next door coming over to eat at the end of the day continued, but now that the place had a little more class and heft, it didn't just draw in the gaffers and the best boys. Now it was the stars and the best boys. This was one of those places, like the Brown Derby, where just everybody ate
somehow
there. Everybody at the same time.
Yeah, they didn't film a scene in Lucy there, so we don't know about it. But no, everybody must have been there.
You got your Gable, your Bogart, Sinatra, Lana Turner, Dean Martin, Ronald Reagan, the actor, James Dean,
the car crash victim,
Marilyn Monroe, the legend, Marlon Brando, the legend, Jack Benny.
Patron saint of touching your own face.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah.
It's pointless to name celebrities that ate there because they all ate there, but I just did anyway.
Are you going to bring up the scene in LA Confidential?
No, but they keep talking about that.
That's funny.
What was it, Lana Turner?
Lana Turner, yeah.
Ava Gardner would sometimes dance around the tables when she was there.
Really?
One time they had to throw out Lee Marvin because he was too drunk. Surprise.
God.
The surprising part of that story is that one time that happened. John Wayne passed out drunk in one of the booths one night, so they just locked him in and they found him making eggs the next day, which is a story literally every single article I read about this place mentioned. They cannot wait to tell you about how John Wayne made scrambled eggs.
That was like the headline. Do you want them scrambled? I can't do a John Wayne voice.
You want them scrambled, partner? Elvis once gave a waitress a Cadillac as a tip there.
Okay.
There's now a display above the booth he and the Colonel always used to sit at. There's a display of Elvis paraphernalia that was given to Quan, who became the owner of the place in 1976 when Bernstein died. It was given to him by the Colonel himself.
Wow.
So it's like a little shrine for Elvis at the table where Elvis would always sit, which is
crazy.
cool. On the other side of that, Clark Gable apparently lived by the motto, frankly, my dear, I don't give a tip. This is my favorite. I love this story. One time he had a bill for $22. So he gave the waitress $25 and she said thanks and took it and then, went, did her job. Passed by his table later, saw he was still sitting there and he said, "Where's my change?"
Oh my God.
The
that guy who sexually assaulted many women and got away with it, he didn't leave a tip?
Arguably the richest man, like the George Clooney of the time.
Where's my $3?
$3. But, sir, I have a child to feed. Yeah, well, I got to harass people.
How old is she?
One time, Howard Hughes owed his friend $20, but the billionaire had to borrow it from Quan because he reached into his wallet, but it was just filled with his own pee. After those glory days of the 40s and 50s, the place became a hot spot for the rock and roll crowd in the 60s and 70s. More recent names like Brad Pitt comes in often dressed like he's homeless so people won't notice him. Tim Burton and Johnny Depp met here to figure out how to make Ed Wood.
Oh, wow.
There's black and white headshots of celebrities everywhere in there.
One of those places, yeah, like a laundromat.
It's a lot like a laundromat, except these people actually were here. Most of them are signed. All the booths are named after an old Hollywood regular, and there's a lot of drinks named after them too, but their most famous drink is still their Mai Tai. They're famous for the Mai Tais.
Oh, wow, okay.
It was such a hot spot that there was a legend that the restaurant was actually connected to the studio by an underground tunnel, but there's no proof.
People love stories of underground tunnels.
They do. They
or like
really
dumb waiters that lead to like a war room with Clark Gable and
Clark Gable is harassing people's daughters, and they were all friends with Quan. Like everybody knew Quan, and he became something of a celebrity within the world of these celebrities. He had his own booth that he was always working out of. They used to be Ava Gardner's booth, but he made sure the restaurant wasn't just for celebrities. He said, here at the Formosa, we always make small people feel like big stars. We are all the same. He still calls them small people though. The other element that had a notorious reputation here was the people from another culture of big names, that underworld of organized crime.
Oh, right.
That we were talking about. This place had a big gangster affiliation for a while, mostly because of the big two who were regulars here. Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel would eat here all the time. They would conduct their business from a private back room in the red car portion, which after them became a VIP celebrity section with a bank of phones that the studios could reach their stars in through these phones.
That's so funny.
Siegel had a safe installed in the floor in there that he would have people put the money they owed him into, which he could then come back later to empty, so that there was legally never any hand-to-hand exchange of cash. In the year 2000, it had been closed since 1947, so they decided to make a big spectacle of it, opening it on live TV by the son of the guy who had installed it in the first place, and thousands of people watched live as it was cracked open and nothing was in there.
Geraldo Rivera opened it.
They kept comparing it to that.
Yeah.
It's now still there. It's a little glass display that you can see
cool.
if you sit at that booth. But the Formosa was a place where actors and criminals knew they could go to relax and be discreet without being bothered by cops or paparazzi at all, unless you're Lana Turner.
Yeah, it's so cool to go there. Like you're Rod Serling and you go there and like all the Twilight Zone fans are outside, but then Mickey Cohen's like, "Shut up!" and they all go.
Leave that dork alone. The restaurant had newer areas added onto it over the years, but in 1991, the inevitable almost happened when Warner Brothers, who still owned the land and the building itself, started planning to tear it down to put up a parking lot. But people flipped out and they got the 1-2 star power punch of John Cusack and Christopher Lloyd to help with the cause. John Cusack, I still want to be in Back to the Future. I don't know if he was, but I feel like John Cusack would have killed to have been in Back to the Future.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. He would have loved that paycheck.
They were helping the cause to get it made a landmark, which it didn't get, but it was eventually given historical status by the city of West Hollywood. But either way, those Warner Brothers backed off and the place was saved for then. Quan died in December 1993 and ownership passed to his grandson Vince Young, but this is the sort of place that doesn't last in modern Los Angeles, and in 2015 it was sold and closed for a complete remodeling that destroyed everything that was good about it. It made it into a sleek, well-lit, modern place that was all gray, did not look anything like the Formosa Cafe, and everybody hated it. So they closed it a year later, and things were not looking good, but then the Saviors came in. It was snatched up in June 2017 by the 1933 group, who were already well respected for what they did to the Highland Park Bowl and the Idle Hour and the Bigfoot Lodge, and we're now going to pour all their efforts into bringing back the Formosa Cafe, and it worked. They painstakingly worked to restore every original thing they could, and if not, they got the next closest thing that they could. They researched old menus and pictures. They made replicas of what they saw or modern twists on them, but a lot of stuff is original because Quan had saved a lot of the old artifacts in his day, and Young gave them access to all of these things. Other stuff is taken from the old storage in the Warner Brothers scenic department.
Really?
So it all has a tie to this past. The deep red booths and the wallpaper and the dramatic lighting, it's all back. The floor of the main bar uses the same type of tile as the Walk of Fame.
Oh, wow.
The back room was set up for special parties, complete with a rotary phone you can pick up to order drinks that come to you through a private window. You still might get some calls from Mickey Cohen. The 1933 group, named after the year Prohibition ended and because they focus mostly on bars, teamed up with the LA Conservancy to win $150,000 grant from the National Trust for Public Historic Preservation to revamp the old red car as well, which is now the oldest surviving red car and the last 800 series car in the entire world.
Wow, really?
I think they wanted to study another one or something that was in some museum, but it had like just caught on fire and burned down. So this is the only one left. An important part of the restoration also was connecting the place to its Chinese roots that were fake at first, but became real later. The menu is now done by David Kuo, who runs Little Fatty, which is a Taiwanese Formosa place, but now there's a special room in there that's dedicated to the Chinese American history of Hollywood.
Wow.
With a curated display of artifacts from that time. The literal bar in that room is also originally from the popular Yi Mi Lu bar in Chinatown, which closed in 1989, which in itself was actually a prop used in the 1937 movie of The Good Earth, which in itself was actually something that they brought over from China.
Right.
So it's a pretty accurate, like, appropriating, but it like becoming authentic. This all cost $2.4 million and reopened on June 28th, 2019. And I remember hearing that on the opening night, Jack Nicholson was sitting at the door greeting everybody who came in, which I'll always regret. Like, I don't even know if you could just walk in, but I heard that Jack Nicholson was like sitting on a stool by the door greeting you as you came in.
So weird.
This is one of those last few old LA restaurants left in town, and it's the kind of place where the bartender and the waitstaff have worked there for 50 years, and it should definitely be the next place on our old restaurant list. And I will be expecting my $3 change in the Clark Dable sexual harassment booth.
The Gable table?